Rename it to council chamber.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Oh, this is time. Just focus on the mayor when he's talking, and then if somebody else is talking, go left or right.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We welcome you to West Valley City Council meeting. We will begin with the electronic statement. Although there are 3 of us here at a city location, we currently do not have an anchor location. It's electronic, and so our electronic statement. Pursuant to Utah Code, West Valley City has determined that this meeting will be held electronically without an anchor location given the ongoing novel coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. West Valley City has determined the pandemic presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at an anchor location. This meeting will be held electronically. Members of the press and public are invited to view this meeting live on YouTube at www.youtube.com/user/WVCTV. Thank you. We note that we have all council members participating electronically from various locations. And don't be fooled by the pictures behind you in all cases. Councilman Fittipaldi is not standing outside in the parking lot. With that, so we have all our council members here, including our city manager and city recorder. We have our minutes of March 23rd to be acted upon.
Mayor, I would move for approval of the March 23rd minutes.
Thank you. Seconds there. Then without objection, the minutes will be approved. Hearing no objection, the voting is unanimous. Next, we just need to verify. We'll review, or we can review our meeting agenda for our regular meeting later this evening. And there were no changes from 2 weeks ago when we discussed these items in our study meeting. Any concerns or issues that ought to be brought up before we get to that later on? Hearing none, we'll move on to, let's see, on our agenda to study is next an application SV-1 2021 filed by Ken Milne. It's a street vacation, 6655 West Fulner Drive, which is at 3635 South, a short stub street. So, and we will deal with ordinance 21-13 in conjunction with this when we do it next week. Oh, Mr. Lehman, I see on the screen there, so he must be ready to take care of that.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve Lehman with the Planning and Zoning Division. As the mayor mentioned, this application is a request from Ken Milne, who is developing the Newton Farm subdivision. He's requesting a street vacation for all of 6655 West at Fulner Drive. We've got a couple of photographs to show you. This is an aerial of the location of the stub street that was platted as part of the Orchard Hills subdivision in 1996. That stub was to provide access to the Newton property to the south. If we could get to the next slide. This is just a zoomed in version showing the location of the stub. You have two homes on both the east and the west side. The area below or to the bottom of the screen is the portion of Newton Farm that is being developed or will be developed shortly, known as Phase 4. Next slide. This is just a street shot from the north looking back to the Newton property. This will be the street that will be vacated. And the last slide is a concept overall of what will be platted as Phase 4 with two cul-de-sacs. And you'll see the road at the top, 6655 West. That is the road that is proposed to be vacated. When the Newton Farm subdivision was presented to the city in 2016, there was discussion about this small little stub street. The developer had petitioned the city to request that it be vacated and wanted to know the city's willingness to do so. And there seemed to be agreement at the time that it wasn't necessary to serve the subdivision to the north. Newton Farm has good connection to the east, to the south, and to the west. Also to the north, coming out of Phase 2, which is just to the east of the phase that you're looking at here. So it was made part of the recommendation to move forward. And so we are now at the final stages of Phase 4. So Mr. Milne is petitioning the city to vacate that right of way. With regards to the vacation, the developer would be required to rip out the existing curb, gutter, sidewalk, and asphalt and put in a new curb, gutter, sidewalk along Fulner Court. And then he will replace the right-of-way with landscaping for each of those two landowners. It was initially thought that the property owner to the east was wanting a drive approach for a future detached garage in the back, but has since agreed that landscaping would be best. So Mr. Milne will be installing an irrigation system and landscaping the side yards of these properties where the vacated right-of-way would be. And that is our report.
Thank you. Council, any comments or questions?
So just one question for Steve. How many homes do we allow on a single entrance into a subdivision?
The fire department allows 30 single-family homes on a single point.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions, Mayor. Steve, it sounds from the presentation that although we had agreed to do this in the future, we're not bound by that agreement. Is that correct?
Correct. This is one of the unique instances that the decision is legislative as opposed to administrative, because it was dedicated property to the city for a public right-of-way.
And then this, I have a question whether the property owners that are gaining property have any, if they provide any consideration to the developer or have any obligation for this at all, or that just it's a boon and a windfall to them to have a larger lot?
It is. By state law, when we vacate right-of-way, half of the road would go to the adjacent landowners. Mr. Milne has discussed this with both landowners, And they agree that terminating the right of way there would be in their best interest. Of course, they are gaining land and the developer would be landscaping that.
But they don't have any financial obligation to participate.
No. And Norma, in certain situations, when we vacate right of way, we did this in phase 3, if you'll recall, to the south, we vacated a small stub road. The developer did install improvements across the right of way there as well. So he's reached out to both landowners and has agreed to install those improvements for them.
Okay, thank you.
Hearing no further questions or comments. Thank you. Next, we'll go to, let's see, another public hearing will be scheduled, application ZT-1 2020. And this will tie in with ordinance that we will consider ordinance 21-14. This is changing our code to amend our residential landscaping and recreation space standards. And so, Mr. Pastorick, looks like you're on for that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon, Council. So this item is in response to a request from the council. Several months ago, we had a number of discussions with the council about landscaping and recreation space standards. And so this ordinance is in response to the council request and incorporates the changes that we discussed, again, a couple of months ago now. And I'm happy to get into any details on the ordinance if there are any questions, but I'll leave my presentation to that and to see if there are any questions.
Council?
So Steve, is this referring just to higher density housing, or is this for residential houses?
So it's really geared towards multifamily, so any kind of attached housing. So it would be townhomes, condos, apartments. In the case of a PUD, you would still have the 50% rule, which is that's the rule that's in place now for a PUD. But really, this is geared towards the multifamily standards.
And does this increase the requirements?
It does for sure for example, rental product. So the standards for rental, like apartments, vary depending on whether it was in like the city center zone or if it was just in an RM zone, the standard is higher. In the case of like a townhome or condo development, the standard is the percentage is the same. It's just looking at how that's or how it's defined is a little bit different.
So what did we change then to? What's the difference?
Right. So it's now with recreation space, it's including indoor space. So for example, if you have an indoor pool or an indoor sports court, that type of space is included in recreation space. Whereas where we're starting to see those kinds of indoor amenities that are being provided and are actually more expensive than doing it outside.
Okay, thank you.
Just trying to remember back to all those discussions we had and which ones we kind of settled on. We talked about a multitude of them. And the one I remember that I brought up was when you had a development that was mixed, in other words, townhomes versus high-density apartments, and if there would be different standards for the two. I didn't go through and check that.
And that is addressed.
Okay, So those are separated. Okay, even if it's a mixed development.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any other issues that the council remembers discussing that they want to clarify to make sure it's in here?
So I have one question. Steve, on 849, line 849,
Okay.
so there is no required yard landscaping or recreation. Help me understand that one, please.
Oh, the
What did-
purpose, yeah, the purpose of this section is just saying that the setbacks, landscaping, and recreation space for one lot can't be counted towards another lot. So it's basically saying each property has to have its own setbacks, own landscaping, right? You can't borrow that from your neighboring lot.
Okay, thank you.
But
Where's the tree requirement at in here?
so that one, as far as internal trees. And so I know this one it's long because mainly because of the definitions. Whenever we make a change in definitions, it makes the ordinance really long.
Okay, but I was just wondering what line it is since this is quite long. I'm just,
Okay, so it is on line 1176.
okay, I hadn't quite got there, so just a couple more pages, there it is.
And then, Mayor, to your point earlier about the, where you have a mix of housing types, that starts in 1173 is where that's addressed.
Okay. Great. Anything else, council members? Hearing no further comments, seeing no hands waving, then we'll go to the next item. For next week, will be our third public hearing. Let's see, application Z-1-2020. Emmanuel and Leticia Moreno, changing from a zone from A to agriculture to manufacturing. And when we consider this, we will include in it ordinance 21-15 and resolution 2146. One, the zone change, the other, the development agreement. And with that, Mr. Pastor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. So this first slide here shows Gates Avenue. And so the two properties in question here are highlighted in red. You can see the address there, 7041 and 7055 West Gates Avenue. The two properties together total 0.88 of an acre. I'll go to the next image here. You can see just a little bit closer up. So this image is a little dated. So the property on the west actually has a home on it that's being used as an office. And then the property to the east did have a home on it, but that home was recently demolished. And just a little bit of background here. What really got this started was the city had started an enforcement case on this property because the owners were operating a stucco business on the property when, so there was no business license and the property wasn't zoned properly for that kind of a business. So among other violations, there's two violations. And so this is the owners efforts to try to get this into compliance by changing the zoning. If the zoning is changed, then they would have to apply for a conditional use permit and business license to get things into compliance. If it's not changed, then they'll just have to no longer operate the business here because it's not zoned for it. But that's what initiated this. Looking at just along the street. So this map here shows zoning along Gates Avenue. So all of the north side of Gates Avenue is zoned manufacturing. And then there are a couple of properties already that are zoned manufacturing on the south side. So you have, for example, the 7-Eleven that's on the southeast corner of 7200 West and Gates Avenue. And then you have a property that was rezoned a few years ago for a small light industrial building to the west. And then everything that's in green is agricultural zoning. So then again, the property in question is the one that's outlined in red. I've got a few just pictures here. So this image shows the existing home that's on the west property. And again, what's being used for now is the office for the business. Next image is looking at the property to the east. And this is the property that had the home on it that's since been demolished. And there are some outbuildings towards the back of the lot or the south end of the lot. This just another shot looking southwest at the house that's being used as the office. This is looking at the home that's to the west, and then also you can see the light industrial building there in the distance. That one was rezoned. This is again
Steve, that we're just showing, is that the one that's between this property and the manufacturing?
Yeah, so the home on this picture right here is the home in between those.
Okay, so that would put that home between two manufacturing uses?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
That's right. So again, here's the light industrial use existing. This is looking to the along Gates Avenue to the east. So of course, at the end of Gates Avenue on the other side of the fence there, you have the R industrial development. So those large warehouse buildings. This shot here is on the north side of Gates Avenue. We've got the manufacturing zoning. One more image here again on the north side. And then finally, again, on the north side here of Gates Avenue. So going back to the plan, so the zoning, the request here is to go to manufacturing zoning so that they could operate the stucco business legitimately under the proper zoning and then get the proper approvals. The Planning Commission did recommend approval, but subject to a development agreement. And in the development agreement, I'm just going to pull that up. So there are several standards here that are proposed in the development agreement. One has to do with the hours of operation. So because you've got homes on essentially three sides, there's the concern about just late hours. So there's an hour restriction that's proposed. The garages that are in the back of the properties would not meet the setback requirements of the manufacturing zone. Basically, whenever you have a manufacturing zoning or manufactured zone property next to residential, the setback requirement is 20 feet. So those buildings would have to either be moved or demolished to comply. So that was a specific standard that was put in. Along with that, and this really just reemphasizes, the third was that they would have to comply with any standards in the M zone. So the Planning Commission's feeling here was, hey, if they're wanting to really make this manufacturing, let's have it comply in every way with the manufacturing zone. And just because it was used residentially before shouldn't mean that they get any kind of exceptions to the rules on manufacturing. So just making it clear that they have to comply with all of the standards in the manufacturing zone. And then finally, the fourth is that they're recommending in the development agreement use limitations, so that some of the uses that would only be allowed in manufacturing, but excluded in like the light industrial zone would be prohibited. So those are the issues addressed in the development agreement. And that concludes our presentation.
Council, yes, go ahead.
Steve, as we looked at the maps, it looks like there's a property a few lots to the west that is a salvage yard in an agricultural zone. Is that correct?
It is, and in that case, that property is non-conforming. So it was in place before the agricultural zoning was in that situation.
Okay, so, I mean, I'm looking at these couple of houses. Looks like we're ending up with probably going a manufacturing or industrial zone along Gates Avenue, probably from street to street. But I am concerned about the homeowners that are still there. They've already been living there with a junkyard, another junkyard, this non-compliant use. What kind of feedback or concern do we have from the residents there?
Surprisingly, we didn't get any negative feedback. We did have an owner that came to the planning commission meeting and asked, what was proposed. And once the applicant described their business, they didn't raise any issues or express opposition. So really, that was the only resident we heard from was one that I believe lives to the south of this property.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Hearing no further comment. Oh, wait a minute. Was that someone? Oh, hearing no further comments or questions, then we'll move to the next item on our agenda, which is Resolution 21-47. This is to authorize the city to enter into a development agreement with Sunrise Baptist Church for about 5 acres of property at basically 3550 South, 4400 West. Mr. Pastorick.
Thank you, Mayor. So this situation is a bit unique and warrants a little bit of a explanation of history. So in the this past legislative session, the Utah legislature passed HB 98. And as part of that bill, our cities are limited in the types of design standards we can have for single family homes, duplexes, and townhomes. And so because of those limitations, as staff, we were concerned about some properties that were zoned for multifamily that would allow for townhomes in a scenario where there would be no design standards under this bill. And so we initiated a zone change to change the zoning on some of these properties where that would be a risk of having a development show up without any design standards. And about the time that we had started that, we heard from the property owner here of this Baptist church. And I'll share my screen here again so you can see the property in question. So it's the Sunrise Baptist Church is on this property here, again, just off of 4400 West. But you can see only roughly about the east third approximately of the property is developed. And they expressed interest in doing townhomes on the western portion of the property. You've got commercial to the north. The property is actually already zoned RM, and it has been for that way for as long as I can remember. And so the owner, in talking with staff, agreed that we don't want to develop a townhome development without standards. We want it to be a nice project. And so they, as we discussed it, we said, well, again, our concern here is the design standards. So if you're willing to commit to design standards by way of a development agreement, then we can take you out of the zone change. And so that's basically why we're here, is to have the design standards that are in our code placed in a development agreement so that once HB 98 becomes effective, we still will have design standards on this property.
Council?
So Steve, the church has voluntarily agreed to what we were trying to accomplish then.
That's correct.
And this development agreement would be enforceable and run with the land.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Hearing no further questions or comments, we'll go on to our next item, which is Resolution 21-48. This is an interlocal agreement between our city and the county for the election services for 2021. And Nicole, is this yours that you're going to handle? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. So this is our typical resolution to enter into an interlocal agreement with Salt Lake County to conduct the municipal elections for this coming season. A couple of things to note. You will see that we have 3 pricing options this time. The council discussed ranked choice voting back in February, but opted to continue with the traditional voting method this year. I think the direction was to just kind of wait and get a better feel for how other cities who might opt in do with it. So I geared this issue paper and resolution to that traditional voting method. Good news on this end is that the county just purchased a new voting software system. And then in conjunction with SB 201, which reduces newspaper noticing requirements, the quote is much less expensive than it has been in years past. So this same election cycle back in 2017, we were quoted at about $180,000. Our actual cost that year was around $128,000. So this year, our worst case scenario election would be a maximum of $106,830. But we will likely end up paying a lot less than that based on previous years. And then I think that's pretty much everything I had to say, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the council might have.
Nicole, the agreement provides for voting machine programming and testing. Are we talking about on-site voting locations? And if so, how many? Or is this strictly 100% by mail? Or what's our agreement with the county here?
So they are talking about, they will have in-person voting locations as well this year. They're still debating on whether or not they want to do early voting locations at satellite sites. They'll do it at their facility down in the county offices, and they'll also, we've also made an agreement to have primary voting and the general election voting at City Hall.
My concern is, 4 years ago was $180,000 we agreed to pay. We didn't end up paying that much, but I'd hate to limit this to $106,000 and then have the county say, well, we can't provide any in-person voting or early voting at City Hall or anything else. I just don't get the sense that we know what we're getting.
The quote does include voting locations. They just haven't determined exactly where or how many, but we did meet with the county where they came and looked at City Hall and kind of estimated how that would look. So I know for sure they are intending on doing primary and general, but we just don't know about the early voting, and that's all included in that quote.
And I think 4 years ago, we had 3 or maybe 4 in-person voting locations on election day. So
that's correct.
Are you telling me that we have the assurance that this would be the same, no less than what we had 4 years ago?
From what I understand, it's going to be a lot more limited since it's all vote by mail. They will just offer most likely City Hall and Salt Lake County offices, at least in West Valley. There will likely be other locations in other cities, but they're still working through that.
But for election day, we would just have one voting location in person here at City Hall.
So far, that's the plan, but they still haven't solidified all the locations.
Right. And so then my question would be, with our remaining $70,000 from what we budgeted 4 years ago, could we induce the county to provide more in-person voting locations?
That's absolutely something I can bring up with the county recorder and just say that, we would like more in our city if possible.
I mean, I don't know how everybody else feels about this, but I think we're transitioning maybe to 100% vote by mail. I don't know if we really want to. I think whenever we do have voting locations, we have lines of people wanting to vote. And although they can just put their filled-in ballot in the ballot box or hand it to a poll worker, there's something about going behind the curtain and punching out the hole or marking the box or touching it with your finger that people like to do, and I don't want to discourage people from voting. So it seems like we would have the funds available to do this, but I would like to get just as much as we can possibly induce the county to give us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can bring that up with them. And I can even get maybe some statistics on how many voters we had that went to each of those locations, just so we have an idea of how effective they are, if the council would like.
Please, I'd like that. But I think I think the issue is that if it's not in the agreement, most likely it will not be provided.
Right. So do we have time to essentially renegotiate or add more provisions to this? Are we under the gun? Do we have to sign this right now and vote on it next week, or else the county won't do anything for us? What options do we have?
We have until the end of the month to get this contract back to the county, so I can absolutely start working with them today and just see what they're willing to do and kind of get that information for you.
Then if we're looking at paying a little bit more money for more guaranteed voting locations, that's something that the council's behind, or am I just speaking for myself?
Well, certainly I would like to see it easy for the public to vote, but I'd also like to see how many that is. If we're talking a dozen people, I say, but if we're talking a couple of hundred people, certainly that needs to be seriously considered. I agree with you, Councilman Bueller. And I see several heads nodding, so sounds like if we can get that information then back to the council as quickly as we can to try and finalize this.
Absolutely, no problem.
Okay. Any other questions? Just information-wise, with these changes that are made, does this provide additional safeguards as far as security, reliability, and accuracy? Did it change anything there, or is that everything still the same?
I was, as far as like the in-person voting, Mayor.
No, I'm talking about the whole voting process. All of these are being done by machine. Does this improve the security of people's votes? Because they have some new software.
That's correct. Yeah, the county purchased Dominion software, and they have done a lot of testing, conducted a lot of research, and they felt that Dominion was a good company to go to. They felt confident in the security and the process behind that software.
Okay, that sounded like the answer was, it's the same.
It's newer equipment, newer software, and the county feels pretty confident in that it's a lot better. Yes.
Okay. Interesting.
Did we?
Maybe I'll have some discussion offline.
Mayor,
Just
and maybe I can
digging in.
add a comment to that as well. As Nicole was saying, and what she's expressing is the best information we have. We really
Yeah.
don't have evaluative ability to assess that. We do rely on the county's procurement process there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I really didn't want to just kind of say it publicly, but that's what I understood. That's why I
Okay.
wanted to, but I think maybe follow up with the county a little
Sure.
offline, and because if it is significantly improved, we'd like to be able to tout that, and
Yeah.
because there have always been questions about security and reliability. So anyway,
So I just sort of emphasizing what Nicole already said. I'm not sure they really described it to us as better, but they certainly did describe it as at least maintaining the same standard they had. So
yeah.
I guess that's the best information we have. Would you concur with that, Nicole?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments or questions, council? Hearing none, then we'll move on to the next item, which is Resolution 21-49. This is for an agreement to procure architectural services from EDA Architects for the design of the Utah Veterans Memorial Park. Jake?
Thank you, Mayor. Jake Arslanian, Director of Facilities and Construction Management. This resolution is to authorize the city of the architectural design services from EDA Architects. And it is, as you mentioned, is for the Veterans Memorial Park, as some of the document in front of you breaks down the cost. I would like to just break down a little bit for you to understand what has happened and what EDA has provided. So if you look at it, we originally started with some concept design, and EDA has not charged us any of those to provide us some documentation with a concept for us to be able to utilize to be able to go out and secure some funding donations for this project. So if you look at the document, it shows that there was $24,000 for that original study, some $6,000 to do some renderings, and then the breakdown for the actual contract for today's purposes was so that there is some engineering firms, architects design for the tune of $129,382. So the total came to $160,152. However, EDA has promised the mayor to donate some contribution to the design for the tune of $30,152. So the contract is for $130,000. However, that did not include the services for geotechnical and surveying and some redesign that we wanted to change one of the water features to accommodate more seating and to bring down the cost of the construction a little bit. So the lower portion where it says survey, geotechnical, and second water feature for the tune of almost $14,000. So we've added another contingency for another $900 or so, and we are asking for this resolution to be $145,900.
145 or 149?
149.
149,500.
Yes.
Yeah, that's in the documentation.
So that's how we came up with that number. So if you need me to go further to show you a little bit more to remind you what we're building, we're only building the park portion as phase one, which in reality will give us all of the veterans memorial and designating or providing, as the mayor talked about it a couple of weeks ago, about bringing all the wars into perspective, especially World War II, and having the names, about 30 3,200 names or so to be displayed on the walls of the monument, and little garden area for to be able to sit down and celebrate the lives that have been lost and have an opportunity to recollect your loved ones. So that's the entire phase one, where you see the red line from that bridge. There's no bridge in this project. It will be a little parking space for ADA parking close to the actual project and few regular parking spaces. The rest of the parking is what the county is building down below, as you see to my right of the picture, and also at the cultural center. So then there is obviously the rest of the renderings you've seen before, and those are only concept plans. So this picture depicts the entire project, obviously, phase 2, 3, 4, however many phases. And the dark areas around the trees that you see, those are the actual buildings for phase 2, which will be the actual center, the memorial center. Then for this purpose, for our phase 1, there will be basically just a memorial. And again, this is nothing but a concept. As we start the design of the project, then we will have more details of heights, openings, as the mayor showed some concerns about the actual, the wall of the names, and of course also depicting the various wars and how we're going to present from World War I to Desert Storm or whatever. So EDA has a very capable team that have built several memorials that are involved with this project now, and they will give us some very good design ideas of fitting our city's desire. Any questions?
I think I would add a comment, just because there have been discussion over the past several years. This does not include the buildings.
No, sir.
No indoor type of situation, nor does it include anything below the canal. As many of you are familiar with the location there, there was talk about doing work around the kind of little water area, lake, pond, whatever you want to refer to it. Those are all for a future phase of the project. Hearing no further comments or questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll go to the next item on our agenda, which is Resolution 21-50. This is to approve a federal aid agreement between the city and UDOT for the design and construction of the Crosstown Trail, I believe between 2700 West and Bangerter Highway. Kobe?
Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon, Council. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to remind you guys what we're dealing with our Crosstown Trail. So we have our Crosstown Trail project that's upcoming. This project will fill in some of the gaps that we have on the trail between 2700 West and Bangerter Highway. We have received some federal funds, Transportation Alternative Program funds, in the amount of $600,000, which includes our match of about $115,000. But that $600,000 is basically there and available for us upon execution of the federal aid agreement to get started on the preliminary design and construction of this project. We currently have a consultant on board that started the environmental process for us, but we will need to execute this federal aid agreement to have access to those federal funds as we get ready to get a design consultant and construction consultant on board in the near future. So the purpose of this resolution is just to execute that federal aid agreement so we can get access to that federal funding to move forward with the design of this project.
Council, questions? Okay. Hearing none. That's pretty easy. Or to accept some money, huh? With that then,
It'll put some necessary sidewalk right there from 32 to that park. Yes, that right there will be very helpful for those residents.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll explore a few different alternatives as well once we get into the design. There's been some discussion of potentially trying to get this crosstown trail down here to follow the alignment of the Chesterfield drain there. And so we will explore a few different options once we get into the design, but until we get a consultant on board and start looking into that, like I say, right now, this is just kind of kicking this project off and getting us access to money so we can get moving.
Okay, thank you.
hearing no further comments or questions, then let's move on to our next item. This is Resolution 21-51 to approve the purchase of some wetland mitigation credits from Wetlands Bank. And so, not sure who's doing.
I think this one's
Is
me
this
also,
one yours
Mayor.
as well?
Yeah. I'll
Okay.
take it. I'll run with it. So, so this resolution and one we'll be talking about in a minute, both are in relation to our 2540 South Phase 3 project, our Beagley Road project. So quick overview to remind you of what we have upcoming this summer out here. Over the last couple of years, we recently completed the construction of Phase 2, which got 2540 South, basically to about 6100 West. That's all in place now and constructed with a temporary turnaround at the moment. So this next phase of the project will allow us to pick up where that road, where 2540 died there, and we'll take it over here and tie it into our south frontage road. This is the 201 South Frontage Road extension that ties into 2400 South. So we'll be taking Beagley Road over to 5900 West and up to that connection so that we'll have a complete connection of Beagley Road and 2400 South. So that's the purpose of our project. We will be advertising it here hopefully by the end of the month to get a contractor out there this summer and get to work on this. As part of this though, you'll see in the purpose of this resolution, we go through some protected wetland areas with the alignment of the road here. In order to mitigate that, so these wetlands are protected under the Clean Water Act. They're regulated under the Clean Water Act. And because of that, once we impact them, we are required to mitigate for any wetlands that we disturb. Fortunately, the disturbance on this project is less than half of an acre. So it enables our 404 permit to go much more quickly. It's more of a nationwide permit rather than an individual permit. So we did qualify for the nationwide permit. And as a result, with us impacting less than half of an acre, we were able to streamline the approval process. We have the approval now. The only thing that's outstanding with this permit is to mitigate for these wetlands that have been impacted. As previously mentioned, we're impacting just less than half of an acre due to the requirements of the Army Corps and where the mitigation bank is that's available. We are required to mitigate it at a 2-to-1 ratio. So essentially we have to purchase just under 1 acre of mitigation credits. And we're proposing to do that from the Machine Lake Mitigation Bank. And so the purpose of this resolution is to authorize us to move forward with the purchase of these wetland mitigation credits so that we can get our.
Okay, thank you. Council?
What portion of our wetland park type project we have out there, is this going to a side of it or is it going to go right through the middle?
So as far as, are you talking about other wetlands outside of this area?
Well, that's what I don't know if that area is in with their proposed park that Nancy showed a couple weeks ago.
Oh, I'm assuming that the park, I didn't see that, but I'm assuming that park is closer to like 6,400 west, further west of this project. Yeah, west of 6,400 west. So the only wetlands that were identified within our project right now, you can see the entire delineation of the wetlands. And this is Mountain View corridor here. So these are all the wetlands that were identified in the impact of this particular project. I believe what Nancy presented was probably further west.
It is, thank you. I just didn't have my coordination or my coordinates in my brain right. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, and I should have said north was to the right on this exhibit here.
And I believe that none of the rest of that land where the wetlands are have any impact on the city. That's all either state or private land, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Hearing no further comments or questions. Thank you very much. We'll go now to the next item, Resolution 21-52. This is a public roadway easement, slope easement, temporary construction access agreement between the city and Rocky Mountain Power roadway facilities. So,
right.
Kobe?
Yep. All right. So I just gave you the overview of the project. Obviously, to get our road built, we need to acquire some right-of-way out there. We have a development agreement coming in that will handle everything that you see on this exhibit as part of the Sage Hill Industrial. And since then, the UDOT has sold this portion, since this exhibit was created, has sold this to a developer as well. So all of the right-of-way needed from those parcels is being dedicated for that development agreement. The outstanding right-of-way, which we will still need to acquire to purchase this road, we will need to purchase a small amount from ICO down here, as well as from Rocky Mountain Power. Rocky Mountain Power owns the property here on this east side. They own it in fee. It is their property, of which they have some transmission lines going through. And typically when they have corridors like this, they will not sell us the property. They will not convey this property in fee. And so actually acquiring the property is not necessarily an option, but they do allow for public roadway easements to be purchased through their property. As a result, we have discussed this with Rocky Mountain Power, and they are willing to sell us allow us to have a public roadway easement through their corridor. In addition to the public roadway easement where our actual right-of-way will be, as we get further north, we have some slopes will be going into their property as well. So we'll have to acquire a slope easement on this north end. And then we have some temporary construction easements. Essentially, the way that Rocky Mountain Power handles these is they have a value of the land and they charge a certain percentage for these easements. For the actual roadway easement where we're putting permanent improvements and permanent infrastructure in place, the fee is basically 90% of land value for the actual public roadway easement. As far as the slope easement, the value of that they charge is 50% of land value. And then the temporary construction easements are at 8% of the land value. Out here, the land value that was determined by previous comps was $6.50 a square foot. Discussing this internally and based upon what we've seen with other parcels in this area, we felt that that was a reasonable price per square foot of which the fees were determined. Rocky Mountain Power actually sold UDOT an easement on this same parcel back in July 2020, and the value at that point was $6.50 a square foot. So Rocky Mountain Power essentially gave us the option just to go with that or to come up with new comps based upon what land values have done over the last year. We felt that it was acceptable to go with that value that was determined in July of 2020, which Rocky Mountain Power agreed to. And therefore, that's the value of these easements that we will need to purchase in order to move forward with our roadway project. So that's in summary what we need from Rocky Mountain Power. So our recommendation would be to execute these easements and purchase these easements so that we can move forward with the construction of our road system.
Okay, hearing no further comments or questions. Thank you very much. We got through that.
Thank you.
Information. Appreciate all that you've shared with us. Next, we'll go to our communications. We have first the current status of our emergency management in the city. And I believe, yep. Chief, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. John Evans. Today I'm the emergency manager. So I just want to go over, let Eric get this up. You go to the next one, Eric. Been quite a year. We've had 2 federally declared disasters in 2020. As everybody knows, about a year ago, we had a 5.7 earthquake. And then at the same time, we were dealing with the pandemic, and we're still dealing with it. I guess from my standpoint, I was never thought we'd have a pandemic of this nature. It's been over 100 years. And I always joked that I hope I never lived through an earthquake. I'd never been in an earthquake till this one, and it kind of woke me up. So here we go. And really, are we ready for the next one? I don't know if anybody can ever say you're completely ready, but I think we are light years ahead of where we were last year at this time. Want to go over a couple of the current statuses we have going right now. Obviously, the coronavirus is still with us. Some of the things that we still have ongoing are the personal protective equipment for employees. We continue following the mandates that are come down from the state and the county with mask mandates. We're pushing the vaccination with both the employees and the citizens. We're still doing distancing, and we're still doing the upgrade of cleaning. I think these will be in place for a bit. We continue to provide information to the citizens and to employees on what's going on. And one of the things that I found with this is it changes pretty much, could be weekly. So, you know, we try to keep abreast of all of it. And then the last thing, we're still doing some in-house virus testing for those who need it. I guess when we talked about the pandemic, I don't think anybody was really ready for one of this size. But I think as a city, we've done a fabulous job with everybody. The next one is the 5.7 earthquake. FEMA is continuing to work with some of the citizens with their grant process they have going. And then what happened in January is the federal government approved, which they denied at first, a public assistance grant. What that is that's for government facilities. So right now we are in the process of working with FEMA for some of the damages we had to city facilities. This is a process that I've never been through. Some of the others have never been through, but it's going well. Working with the finance department, and we'll just keep moving forward. This will probably could take upwards of 6 months to get the final approval from FEMA for their money. But so far, everything they've said that we've asked for or showed them, it's been going good. Want to give current items and updates for emergency management. One of the things that we have learned through this, there's a whole bunch of things. like I said, I think we're better prepared now than we ever have been. And in emergency management, it's not one department. It's every department in the city that has to be involved with this. And I will say, as the emergency manager, every department has stepped up. They've been fabulous. Anything that's required, they've stepped up, they've helped. We have outlined different things, and we have included most every department. And I can't say enough to thank the other department heads for the support they've given in this. So some of the current things we have with emergency management, we've continued to update our EOC. We were in the process of that when everything started to happen. So we kind of just finished it up. One of the things that we implemented though, and this was kind of on the fly, is a virtual EOC. One of the things that the federal government, even now, the state, they went to a virtual system. And one of the reasons being was because of the pandemic. You know, when you have to try to get a lot of people together, you could no longer do that. So we've went to a virtual system. I will tell you that between Eric Bunderson and the IT department, they've done a lot of work, and we have a system that I think is better than any of them that's out there in the state. As a matter of fact, we've had other cities ask us for how we've done it. We can actually operate an entire incident virtually. It's a great system. I can show it to you one of these days, but I'm not the expert in it. The expert in it is behind all of you in the virtual EOC. I'm lucky still to turn on computers and stuff. So, but I've learned it, which is good for me. We've updated the mobile EOC. One of the things that we found was when we had a 5.7 earthquake, our current EOC, we really couldn't use. It's here in City Hall. There was damage to City Hall. We did not know how much. So we have set up an entire mobile EOC. We can run all the city operations mobily in a large parking lot footprint. And we continue to update this, and we continue to add things to this. So one of the things that in emergency management you have to do is redundancy. We do have the EOC here, but we have a few levels more. We can do it mobile EOC, we can do it virtual, we can do a combination of all three. And it seemed to have worked out good for us. The next one is we've implemented a new situational awareness software. It's called Alistar. And basically what we can do with this software is virtually we can see cameras, we can give a common operating picture to everybody that's working virtually. We can do it with the elected officials, and the software we've implemented, I think, will be a great boost for us. And this is fairly new. And then, of course, we continue to update our communications, both with satellite, radio, and cellular. During the earthquake, we were fortunate at 5.7 that it didn't knock out the cellular system, but anything a little bit above that, you know, we're going to have to look at some other things, both with radio and satellite, which we did. Next. Our plans. One of the things that in a planning process, you see there's a circle from everything from preparedness to mitigation. We have updated quite a few of our plans in the last year. The city emergency operation plan, the continuity of operation plan, mitigation plan, the pandemic plan, which was really small, now it's really big. And then we're working on some incident specific plans. The one good, and that's bad terminology. The one thing about everything we've lived through is we learned we had to change a lot of stuff, a lot of things in our plan. And nobody ever wanted an earthquake, nobody ever wanted a pandemic. But one of the things we were able to do is gain a lot of knowledge, and we've changed our plans to fit that. And I think that's one of the reasons we're a lot better off than we were probably a year ago. Current items, some more is training. One of the things, training will never stop. We have implemented a 3-year training plan. About every other month, we're doing exercises. We've completed so far this year 2 exercises. We completed a winter storm, which that obviously is always for us, and then some cybersecurity. We are starting with some of the key people in the EOCs, doing some independent study courses through FEMA, and we will continue to train our people on the virtual EOC. Training is key to this. And here again, every department in the city has stepped up, and I can't say enough. It's just been great to see the involvement with all the departments. So what's next? Well, I hope it's not another pandemic. I hope it's not an earthquake. Give us something simple for a while instead of the curveballs we've been throwing. We will start doing some recovery planning. This was a plan that we need to do that we found out after the earthquake, and now working with FEMA. We're going to continue to do some hazard analysis to see where some of our specific hazards would be. We will do specific department training for positions. We will keep doing that. Our inventory system that we have, we've now went to an electronic inventory system. We know where everything is. With some of the disposable items, we know what we have on hand, what we need to order. We'll continue to work on our mobile EOC. And then one of the things that's here, the second to last, is a Lifeline program. This is a requirement by the federal government, and it's a great program because what it is what it just says. It's lifelines. After disaster, what do you need to do to get somewhat back to normal, or to at least give a roadmap? If Lifeline, is there fuel? How do we get fuel? Is there electricity? When can we get electricity? It just gives you a snapshot of where we have to be. So we will implement that, and then we will continue the public outreach. Next, I'm willing, I know that was quick, it was brief. I'll take any questions you have, as long as they're not too hard.
Chief,
Oh, boy. Everybody's hands up.
are we still members of VEC? I mean, VEC provides our 911 service.
Yeah, yes, sir.
So we don't control that operation. What redundancies, or what do we do if VEC goes down, or how confident are we that they have redundancies in place? Because we could have another earthquake and we're all staffed and ready to go and everybody's here, but we can't get any calls.
Yeah, and that's kind of a two-edged sword. With VEC, they do have backups. I will tell you that the building that they were in were built years ago to withstand a large earthquake. They were built on some shock absorbers. So obviously that's never 100%. The other thing that they can do now, that over the past few years, is the system now can switch calls to different centers. I mean, they can go to Salt Lake, they can even go up into Weber County or into Utah County. So there is some redundancy out there, but obviously if everything goes down and the phone lines go down, there's probably no dispatch center that will be up and running, but they do have a lot of redundancies in place.
Is there anything that we can do to not be so reliant on somebody else?
Not really. I mean, when it comes to a dispatch center, how they're laid out, how the 911 system is laid out, there's not a lot we can do independently of them.
And is there anything we can do to support and encourage and help them be as prepared as we are?
And we do that. There is say, each of the cities have members on the board, but we continue to work with VEC and make sure their plans are in place along with every other city, because there's about 9 of us that are relying on them. And so it's on everybody's mind, not just ours.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, had a question, just, you mentioned on FEMA, we're now getting some feedback from them and hopefully some funding from them, but it'll be about 6 months before we get through all the paperwork. Well, this happened a year ago. What about the public? Or were they able to get what they needed from FEMA any quicker than that?
You know, I wish I could answer that question. I do know that FEMA was here and tried to help the public and speed it up a little bit. I can't tell you the exact amount that they have been able to give to the citizens or the businesses, but I can find that out for you.
I just, I don't
will
want
find that
them a year out, still waiting for 6 more months to get the help they're promised.
Mhm. I think the other thing that's caused some issues, even with FEMA, that we found out, is usually after disaster, they'll actually bring teams out here to do the inspections and do everything. But with the pandemic, everything has had to be virtual. I know just in the grant process we're working with the city facilities, they'll tell us, hey, go take a picture of this, or take a picture now that it's fixed, because they're still not coming out. So it's a process that we'll work through. Hopefully it speeds up a little quicker than not.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
It seems like you have obviously prepared for many different scenarios. But what happens if you have multiple scenarios at the same time? For example, you have an earthquake that disrupts power, water, natural gas, phones.
Mhm.
During a pandemic, there's a major winter storm on and it's nighttime. So you have everything working against you.
Yeah. And you know what? I guess the best way I can answer that is we're going to bite it one piece at a time. We're going to find out what's the most important. How can we get not life back to normal, but life to where people can survive? And it's what you said, right? Our earthquake was small, but right in the middle of this, there's like a pandemic. And so well, stay 6 feet apart. I can't talk to you right now. And some of it, I'll tell you, maybe went out the window a little bit because we were dealing with an earthquake at that point in time. And I guess you got to figure out what's the most important. And, it is true, Mayor. I guess the only thing that didn't happen in the earthquake is it didn't snow. I know it was cold that day, as I remember. Does everybody else remember it was kind of cold? And I actually forgot a coat. So yeah, we won't go into that, but that's my own fault. So, it wasn't snowing, but you're right. In these type of disasters, everything happens. So what we tried to plan for is some redundancies, but try to take it one piece at a time. And this is where the lifelines will come in good, is because we got to figure out what's the most important for the citizens to get back to normal. And that's what we're planning for.
Okay. I'm sure that would never happen all at the same time, but certainly it's obvious that there can be more than one issue at a time.
Is this real wood? Because I'm knocking on it right now. Like I said, I never thought this would happen in my career anyway, but some of you may have lived through earthquakes and are pros at it. Me, I was like, wow, this is nice. But now I can say I've actually been through one. So.
Well, and there's any number of things that can happen, but
Yeah.
We do appreciate the work that you do. And yes, I know personally, I was very impressed with how you handled the earthquake. Not just in the actual work, but in the timing of how quickly you were able to respond and assist people. And certainly because of its relatively minor, it's minor if it didn't happen to your house.
If it didn't happen to you, it was minor.
Yeah. And so just appreciate the work you do and the training you go to and the effort you put into planning and preparing. That's very, very critical. That makes a huge difference in the middle of a disaster, and in many cases saves lives and many other things because of that preparation. So appreciate your working on that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, next we have another communication item, an economic update. Oh, picture of Mark Nord came up. And so I'm guessing you're going to help us with this.
Yes. Thank you, Council. Good evening. So typically when I have a presentation to you is largely about the amount of capital investment, the property tax and sales tax increases that we've hopefully created. Today, I'm actually going to take a little bit of a different approach and give you a little bit more of an economic update and market overview for what's going on in West Valley City. So you are well armed and well versed in what's going on in your city. And to do that, I'm going to share my screen here to start the presentation. Okay, is everybody able to see that?
Yes.
Thumbs up. Thank you, Mayor. So back in 2010, 2011, your predecessors put down a marker along the 7200 West and 201 corridor that this was going to be one of our distribution and industrial kind of strongholds. And that marker is proving to be one of the best decisions we've made in a long time, as the industrial sector has just absolutely been blowing up with growth. This is something that I think even back then we didn't expect to see the amount of growth that we're seeing here. It's just absolutely been one of the strongest economy boosters in the state, as well as for West Valley City, that you can target and look back directly to and say, wow, this has just absolutely been an influx of capital. So we were positioned back then to really start to identify ourselves as one of the larger cities that has distribution space. We had a few pockets of good industrial at the Covey campus, as well as Presidential, if you're familiar with those two locations, but really having a distribution center, we didn't have a whole lot of that. And so with that marker that was placed in 2012, we really put ourselves on the map, and it was some really good forethought to put that there because of the geographical destination. Its proximity to the major artery of 201 Mountain View Corridor, I-15, 215, really launched us onto the national market. When we talk about industrial, office space, and retail, there's three classifications that brokers, site selectors, and companies like to look at. And they're actually Class A, Class B, and Class C. Similar to your grades in high school and college, A being your best, B being your next best, and C being the lower tier. With Class A industrial space, we have quite a few new industrial parks that have popped up. Obviously, one of our largest to date is ARA, which was developed by Freeport West out on 7200 West and right off of 2100. Class A office space, or excuse me, Class A industrial space is typically going for 45 cents to 52 cents a square foot. That sounds like not a lot, but then when you think about the size of these buildings, ranging at the smallest at 350,000 square feet, all the way up to the one that's just basically being completed at 876,000. That 50 cents a square foot adds up to be quite an annual lease payment. So that number is actually pretty high. The average a year and a half ago was 35 cents a square foot was the average lease that we were seeing in the Utah market. So where we're currently getting 45 to 50 cents a square foot, it just shows the amount of demand and where this market is going. Class B industrial space is typically associated with maybe smaller or older areas. When you look at these new buildings, we're typically building something that has 32-foot ceiling heights or higher, and it has either cross dock or front loading docks. And those older buildings typically were built with a 28-foot tall ceiling. And when you have a lot of these tenants that are looking for racking and storage, that 32-foot clearance is kind of the norm now. And so what designates an industrial building, whether or not it falls into the Class B, is if it has that lower ceiling height, and is not located along a good major artery or transportation corridor. Those are the things that really set it apart. The primary tenants that we're seeing locate within these buildings are largely third-party logistic companies. These are fulfillment e-commerce based businesses that are sending all their logistics here to West Valley City. They repackage them, ship them out to other locations in the Intermountain States. A smaller piece of the pie are manufacturing, and then even a smaller piece of that are R&D. We have somewhat of a healthy balance, but we're still predominantly third-party logistics statewide. Here in West Valley City, still that's the majority, but we do have a little bit more than our fair share of R&D comparatively to the Freeport Center up in North Ogden or Salt Lake City. I would say when you look at who is our main competitor nationwide, West Valley City competes with Texas, Chicago, and Reno, Nevada. Now you're going, why are those three even in the same sentence? Texas has great access to major arteries and being able to get transportation and distribution out. Chicago, because of its centrally located and the workforce as well for both that Texas and Chicago. And then Reno, Reno has a kind of a Western presence, but they're also very aggressive in the way that they recruit these international or industrial developments. They are heavily incentivized and they have a lot of land, and they're able to essentially build out and recruit some pretty large tenants. So those are our three main competitors when we're looking at national tenants. When they come and they're assessing whether or not Utah or West Valley City is their location, I always am going up against those three. Although it seems like we have quite a bit, when you look at this slide, those are big numbers. We're actually still fairly small when you look at distribution space in Utah. We fall probably in the top 5, but we're probably on the lower end of that, either 4 or 5 in terms of the product that we have. That's due to the fact that we are running out of land, and these industrial distribution centers take up quite a lot of acreage. So Salt Lake City still is probably the largest distribution city in the state. Like I said, we fall in that 4 range based off of our product and what we have. Our major feather in our cap is the way we've positioned ourselves and where these centers are. The proximity to 201 and now Mountain View Corridor gives us a leg up with our competitors. And I think we're going to continue to see this economy, in the sense of the industrial economy, continue to rise. And we're just going to continue to see more and more growth. Where we cap out is essentially land. There becomes a point where we just don't have the land available for this type of development within West Valley City. And as we're starting to see that already in the Northwest quadrant, you look at ground that is very difficult to develop in what we've called the triangle, which is the north side of 201 and 7200 West. This ground is and continues to be very difficult for any type of development. This has been somewhat of a I would say people have left a lot of just rubbish and waste in the area. We've had soil issues with wetlands. Former Councilman Corey Rushton used to always tell me the story of how, when he was growing up, he used to water ski on a small reservoir of where Freeport West currently sits. So this was not great soil, and it takes a lot of infrastructure to come in here and build these type of developments. And so I think it's something that we're going to have to continue to work with. But as soon as we finish this kind of Northwest quadrant, we do have a little bit of an issue where we just don't have any type of land for new growth. And so I think that's going to limit our ability to continue to see the industrial growth continue in West Valley City. We do have that ceiling. And let me go on to the next market sector, which is sorry for my little babies in the background, apologize for that, which is the office sector. As many of you know, our Fairborn office tower is an absolute gem, and it's a beautiful office tower, and I think it draws a lot of attention to our Fairborns downtown. Timing wasn't great with the conclusion of this tower, as right when it was concluded, we were 2 months into COVID. And as you know, with most office tenants, everybody's kind of trying to figure out what the new norm will be. How many new tenants are looking at actually new space right now is very few. A lot of new office tenants are just kind of holding steady right now and not making any big decisions until they understand, one, how much longer are we going to be facing this pandemic, and do we want to restructure the way we enter the workplace, and do we need to have all the employees there on a day-to-day basis, or do we want to do a staggered type of hybrid model? And so Fairborn, I think will obviously the office market will come back, and Wasatch has positioned themselves well enough that they're riding out the storm, but we are anxious that we'd like to see this pandemic get back to normal and go away so we can start to revisit the office component. I'm 99% sure most of you are familiar with our Soleil product as well. We have really good Class A offering for office right now in West Valley City, between the Fairborn Office Tower and our Soleil Tech Park, which is located out at Lake Park. These are unique, very high-end, top finishes type of office building that we have not had a tremendous amount of product in the past to offer. So between Soleil and Fairborn Office Tower, we are very flush with Class A office. That's that top tier, which is, like I said, we just haven't had a lot of that history, a lot of that supply to offer to office tenants. So once things start to get back to normal, we're excited to be able to go out and promote these two types of products. So it's kind of a crystal ball. I don't know when that's going to be, but office tenants will come back. But until then, we're positioned well, and we have the availability with these office towers. Let me speak a little bit about retail. The retail game is all about drive-throughs now. Everybody is just screaming from the mountaintops, we are only moving if we can have a drive-through. It used to always be associated with fast food. Now quick serve restaurants and even fast casual are all requiring that their brokers only select sites that have drive-throughs. And that is, I think, the absolute product of what the pandemic showed us, is that the mom and pa's and high-end dining have suffered because they did not offer a drive-through component. And I think initially for the next few years, most of these retailers that are looking for locations are going to be requiring that type of conditions for a drive-through, as they are just scared. It just absolutely gutted restaurants that didn't have drive-throughs. So that is definitely, I guess, playing a part in where we are recruiting and where we are seeing new development. If zoning doesn't allow for drive-throughs, they're not even considering it. And that's just something for us to know, and we're understanding it, and we're patient. So in those zones where we don't allow drive-throughs, that is the reason why maybe we're not getting as much growth as some of the other areas. I'm not saying we need to change it. That's up to you guys, but I just need you to be aware that those are the conditions that we are constantly being asked when site selectors and brokers are saying, hey, is there a drive-through? And I'll tell them about the current zone. They might take a second look at some other location because of that. Typical retailers that we would normally see out and about, like your fashion industry, typical mall tenants, they're a little bit dormant right now as well. Similar to office, they're kind of taking a pass and waiting on things until they look at expansion models right now. We are seeing a little movement in non-traditional retail tenants, and these are entertainment. I'm calling them entertainment tenants, but it's kind of the trampoline parks, the jump houses. Those things are out and about, and they're looking for locations, but we haven't really actively engaged with those in the past. And so just to be aware that those are looking for additional locations. Those seem to be somehow they have decided to expand during the pandemic, which is an interesting concept in of itself. But so that's kind of a brief overview on retail. Let me kind of give you price per square foot on retail, so you know. Class A, which is 5600 West, Highbury, even Valley Fair Mall, the external pads, you're looking at low 30s to 35s per square foot on a core and shell. That's not including the tenant improvements, but that's typically what you're looking at for Class A retail. Class B, which is I associate with Vasa along 35th, that whole development around by next to Granger High School, you're looking at the low 20s to mid 20s. And then Class C, which is I would say closer to some of the older stuff along Redwood Road, you're looking in the high teens in price per square foot. And so those are pretty comparable, and they've kind of been the same over the last few years. Not a big jump like we saw in industrial. It's kind of just stayed flat over the last couple of years. And let me see. We do have a few new kind of, I guess, retail slash, yeah, it's all retail, new additions that I don't know if you're aware of, but obviously you've seen the Mountain America that's going across the street from Granger Medical. That they're building a fantastic new building over there that we're excited about. Panda Express was able to negotiate a good deal with the Valley Fair Mall. They'll be locating just adjacent to the In-N-Out, and we're still pushing for this Raising Cane's to be the first. It's going to be a little bit of a race, but we think we're going to be the first to have a fully Raising Cane's in the state of Utah, it's a big chicken restaurant out of Arizona. So I kind of gave you a very brief overview of some of the high level things regarding each one of the major sectors. I would like to hear any questions if you have any at this point.
What are the current projections for where everything is going? You know, the pandemic kind of stymied a lot, but Utah's still doing well. Is that expected to continue? What's happening out there? What direction are things going generally?
So in the industrial market, Utah is number 2 in the nation, and that's projected to continue to grow, especially with the inland port. So huge trajectory up with the industrial market. Office is flat, and it's flat nationwide. We just don't know, and I think everybody's just holding their cards close to the vest because nobody knows, even with the vaccine and the rollout, until we, I think, get a little bit more of a green light and a comfort, I don't see the office really taking off yet. So that's going to be, I think that's going to be led out by the nation's ability to recover from the pandemic, and not in a financial sense, but in more of a comfort level to go back out. Retail, I think we in Utah are still thriving. We are still a high growth community. We're seeing a tremendous amount of new rooftops. And when you see the new rooftops, retail follows. So some of the really high growth centers are a little bit further to the south, where you have new emerging cities, Saratoga Springs, Riverton, things like that. Where we are, West Valley City, we still have a tremendous amount of rooftops coming in here, and we're starting to see some infill retail development. So I still see retail and industrial going up, industrial skyrocketing up. Retail on a good, consistent growth. And then office is just going to be, it's stalled until we get to a better position.
Thank you.
Mark?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for your information, but I appreciate that very much. I think it's great. You mentioned about office warehouse in the west side, nearby, a long way with the 201 highway we have here. I think it's a highlight of our city. Most people I heard, they talk about it too. They mentioned about that. So that's a great thing about our city. You share with us about, no land there, and we're not gonna do more because basically, we run out of land. I brought this one up before, but I'm gonna do it again. Maybe you think you guys gonna think maybe I'm weird, but I think it's the right thing to do, man. We need to annex Madness City. It's not about this one reason, but multiple reasons I want to do that. Reason number one is the court. You sit down with the Salt Lake County, and people says they have to go to West Valley City or some city adjacent to them. It's only West Valley City. Okay, security by police department is sometimes we have to walk over their boundary or their city area to help them out because we are so close to them. It's about dying. We go out, they go shopping and go dining, they go eating dinner and other places in our city. And now we're talking about office warehouse. I think there's multiple reasons we can annex that city with us. I think we can work with the county and state and try to get that done. Maybe you think I'm weird, but I don't think that's weird at all, to be honest with you. Maybe too much a job, too much a load of work for you to do, but I think it's the right thing to do. Because basically the pocket way west and they have to rely on us, everything. And I sat down with the county not long ago. And in fact, I just ran into them and they said about that. They said about them relying on West Valley City, multiple things. Weird idea, but I think they're legit.
You know, my response to that, I have always been in the mindset that I need more land in West Valley City. I need more land to be able to develop. I mean, we look at this and we're trying to figure out ways to develop the remaining parcels. We are protecting them from in doing the right type of housing. But I have to tell you, we positioned ourselves very strongly in 2010, 2012 by doing this. A lot of cities are trying to now get into the distribution game, but this is the product of multiple years in preparation. This just doesn't happen overnight. And having that availability of land along that corridor definitely put us in the driver's seat. And now we're having national discussions. And I can tell you, we are definitely on the national tenants radar where, 6-7 years ago, we weren't. We just didn't have the supply. And we're now, I can't wait to show you some of the new projects that we're bringing here in the next few months. But these are some national tenants that I would never have expected had we not had the foresight to put those distribution centers along our major transportation corridors. So land is always something unique that has given us a little bit of a leg up. And you look at the East Bench, there's no way for any of these distribution centers to go anywhere along the East Bench. And they are not able to capitalize on that. And when you look at something like the pandemic, what is the one market that absolutely has taken off? It's been distribution and e-commerce. And if you were completely dependent on a retail-based budget, you were hurting. We were very diverse. We had office, retail, and industrial. And luckily industrial we had enough that it absolutely was taken off during the pandemic and we didn't get as hurt as other cities may have.
Here, my personal thing I want to share with you guys. I have a client from Oregon and he knew about this Highway 201. He asked me, Tom, is the office warehouse in Highway 201 city and also Salt Lake City look really good. We're attractive. See, that's a lot of people out there, they know that.
Love that.
Okay, sounds like, or I don't hear any more comments or questions. So Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you, Council. Appreciate it.
And we'll finish out our agenda. Anything on the calendar? Potential future agenda items? Council reports? Wow, I think that's the fastest we've ever gotten through those 3 items. So anyway. And how much time do we need on a closed session, Mr. Pyle?
We can get this finished in the 15 minutes or so that we have, Mayor.
Do you want to try and squeeze that in now?
Yep, absolutely. I'm sure Eric can get that done.
Okay, because we do have a very short regular council meeting.
I don't think we need it. I don't think we have any major updates, just a review of the cases that we've had.
Okay, well, we very well may start our regular meeting just 5-10 minutes late. Anyway, with that, let's close this one.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay. Without objection, we'll stand adjourned. Hearing no objection, it was unanimous. We are adjourned. Well, excuse me. We need to rephrase that. We are
Okay.
not adjourned. We are, why don't you restate the motion? Since
I would
got it.
move that we go into a closed session for the purpose of potential litigation. And we will not speak of anything else besides that. And then we will adjourn and come back to our public meeting.
Thank you. Motion is properly before us. Without objection, we will go into a closed session and then adjourn.